Uh, this is my first time live. No one is watching, although I figured I would at least get on and try to describe my emotions today. Uh, you get to this point of your awakening where you just get so frustrated because no one can hear you. Um, you think someone can hear you, but then if you really, really listen, they're not hearing what you're saying. um, If you listen to, like, their responses and reactions and you really quiet the mind down enough to give them time to give some feedback, you realize that most people can't even hear what you're saying. There's this type of distortion field in the way. And so I've gone on this journey hoping to find some beings who have found some truth, because finding the truth for me was, at least for what I see now as truth, it took a lot of work. I got pretty immersed into my spiritual practice and spent a lot of time doing things that I thought were helping me to awaken. Was following ideas and symbols and different teachings, thinking that I was finding the truth. And I was obsessive, um, which is as we all should be. Although I was putting all my energy into the wrong things, and even though it was the right path, it's like I was stuck and I was slowly getting diverted. And so I had another awakening, realizing that I had been wasting my time, uh, and a lot of time and a lot of effort. If I had just dug a little deeper into some of the questions I had, I would have realized that I was wasting my time. And it seems to be that over and over again. If I look back on my life, I had the right questions, but then I didn't dig deep enough. Um, how do we get to the point where we can recognize those important questions, those questions that could help us get through the blockages and stay on our path? It's a really important one. Um, I'll tell you the example of what I was working on was I started to study knots in the body and how these knots are connected to our perception. Um, and our thinking patterns are building certain knots around the body. And so you can kind of get an idea of how they are perceiving the world by observing their form, their knots, how they hold themselves up. And so I started to work on the knots in my face because I was told by a healer that this is where I was storing all my trauma. And so I got fixated on this idea of getting the knots out of my jaw and getting my jaw to release. And then eventually, just like the knots around my face. And I spent a year, about 10 months, obsessing over massaging these knots out of my face. And once you start really like getting into it and you feel them, like you start realizing how many are in there. And I thought that if I healed the knots up here, that this would stop triggering the knots on the rest of my body. Um, and I kept asking myself, there's got to be an easier way to do this. There's got to be a better way, because the amount of work it would take to just get one knot to soften and go away, that wasn't, well, go away for a little while. It was insane. It was a lot of fucking work. And so finally, 10 months later, I had really dove deep into the fascia, and I had been able to really quiet down my mind throughout that time. And the fascia was slowly starting to wake up. And I started to realize that for one, it's all connected. So if you can get as many knots throughout the body through these beautiful twists and turns, some of them are in Qigong, you see a little bit throughout the world, but There's not a structured way for anyone. It has to be different. Each person has to come to this realization on their own of how to move to unlock their body. You can't have anyone tell you a structured form. It's not how it works. And so I started working on that. I'm like, okay, that's the key. I got to start moving my whole body. I can't just sit in a fucking chair and massage these knots out of my face. And that led me to um, becoming more and more aware of the energy programs that are stored in each knot and what they're connected to. And then the big realization happened where I realized that these knots are connected to entities, and it's the knots throughout the body are creating a false identity. And as long as this entity can trigger your knots, you're never going to fucking get rid of them. You might get a deference pattern, like you work on that pain or that, you know, you go to the gym and you get really buff and you're like, oh, I'm not slouching anymore, but it's just creating some type of deference pattern. So that knot that was holding you down is just deferred, not quite gone, but it's deferring to another knot now. And it can just trigger each other, if that makes any sense. So now on my spiritual journey, I'm working on severing these chains, because you could call it an attachment or you could call it a chain, but there are chains connected to these entities. And so recently I was able to finally find a group of people who are talking about it. I've not been able to get a hold of them, but I would like to find people who are aware that there is a false identity, which is pretty common in the spiritual age. Like people are aware there's a pretty big false identity, ego, whatever you want to call it. But I would like to find beings who are aware that there are entities, dysbiotic entities, who are feeding off us through these chains. And they are not in this realm, they're in this energetic, spiritual realm, whatever you want to call it. They do not incarnate on Earth, and they have trapped us here. Uh, some of us have come recently, but a lot of our soul family have been trapped here for a long time so that these entities can feed off of them. The more the more angels they can get here, the better for them because they get to just feed. And so I guess one of my biggest frustrations today, how I'm feeling, is I'm just really fucking fed up with not being able to find my soul family and people who are aware that this is a really serious thing we're doing here. We didn't come here to learn. All these shitty things aren't happening to people just so we can fucking learn. That's so egotistical. Like, oh yeah, people have been treated like shit throughout history, never been able to be free or be themselves. If they do, their fucking civilization gets annihilated, all just so that we can learn, you know. We all pat each other on the back when this is over with. Yo, thanks for fucking me up. At least we learned. Like, no, this shitty existence is not just so we can fucking learn. But that is what you tell your slaves to keep them good slaves. We came here for a really important reason, and that's because we have soul family that needs to be freed from this cycle, and that we are coming to a tipping point where if we just need to figure it out real quick, we need to have this awakening. You know, everyone asks, what's the awakening? Well, the awakening is you being able to use more than 10% of your brain. You being able to start to use the energies around you, uh, work with them. You know, we will get magical abilities like we once had, or like the beings here on Earth once had. We will be able to do things that are incredible. Will we still be here on this Earth doing those things? I don't know. Is the Earth going to be destroyed? I don't know. Uh, but we at least need to be able to tap into these abilities again so that we can start to free the souls from this earth plane. So that's a big whole jumble back to the beginning of, how do we know if we've found the truth? How do we find the truth? I thought I'd found the truth pretty hardcore. I had drawn all of these sigils or sacred drawings, placed them all over my wall for protection of my mind. I had necklaces with different meanings that to protect me, and I had different sayings and things. And about 3 months ago, I started to realize that a lot of these things were actually keeping me hypnotized. Um, I thought there was just one, I thought there was a mother and father creator of the universe, and I had come up with these names for them. And it turns out that those were just entities who were keeping me hypnotized. And I was almost worshiping them in a way with their names on my walls with sacred symbols and stuff. Um, I came to think for now, there's 9 creators of this universe, and then a lot of angels. And most of us are angels. And there really was a fall where a lot of the angels left heaven. And that's a longer story for another day. But that we must get down to this truth. We must remember what we were doing before here. Who is our soul? What element do we come from? Um, during this whole hypnotized state, I was thinking came from the element of love, and then I was an angel of love. And I do think that I'm connected to that in some way. But for me, I've come to realize that my name is Eva, and I am an angel of truth, justice, and faith. And so that is the element I come from, and that is the message that I will bring to this realm, to this earth for the awakening. And we all have a different message and something to bring so that we can start freeing the minds of this hypnosis, of this storytelling, this false identity, these programs that we are identifying. People are identifying with their disease, with their programming, and they just call it the ego, but they can't even separate the programs from self. I've rarely been able to meet very few people who've been able to actually know who I is, because everyone has a different I, or else there would be no boundaries. I think that's the last thing I'll get at here is if we can find that knowing of who I is. Like, yes, we are all one, just as we are all one with this table, but you have your own frequency, you have your own song that you have been singing forever. There is no Big Bang, there is no beginning or end. We have always existed, and there is a great continuum. But we came out of that great continuum with a song that we were singing in the great continuum. And this song is what we will always be singing. Each and every one of us has a different song. And that is sovereignty, that is autonomy. And it's very important that we find that, because that is how you find that I. That is how you awaken, is just that inner discovery of, oh, this is who I am. And then nothing can take that from you. There's all these new age spiritual dogmas that'll try to take that from you. But you are sovereign. You have a soul song that is yours. And it is very important to the function of this entire universe, is your soul song. And it's beautiful, magnificent. And it helps to create and inspire. And it's woven through the entire universe. We all have a song that is woven through the universe. We are all omnipresent. And so to realize that we are this magnificent and we have been fractured down into this is a scary thing, and that we are being fed upon and tricked. It's we must remember that we came here to do something extremely important, extremely fucking important. It's not just here to, like, live some mundane, shitty life and try to be positive about it. So, anyways, I'm becoming one in here, and I have suppressed justice, that part of me that needs to say these things. I have suppressed I because of the reaction I get from people, and so now I'm doing this channel. I don't have any followers. I don't care. I'm just hoping that I can start to express this part of I, which needs to speak these truths. I would love to see justice brought forth into this world. So here I come. Thank you.